pretty easy to find examples, however, of people talking about bulk titanium fires, and while I've got no reason to disbelieve them, I like seeing experimental evidence. You know, you could say anything. You could tell me there was nuclear testing on Mars, but what evidence do you have? I mean, you could draw pretty convincing blast radius maps with the craters, and it would explain why the hemispheres are so different. The noble gas isotopes are really consistent with a nuclear blast, and there's no other real way known of making those isotopes, so... Wait. What? But, who's launching the nukes? Was no one on Mars? There was no one on Mars. I'm getting off track already. We've got a simple goal this video, and I'm already getting off track. We're staying on track. As an aside, I want to talk about how cool these acetylene bottles are, because you can't compress acetylene because it can explosively polymerize and it's not safe to transport like a normal gas. So what gets done is the acetylene gets dissolved in acetone, and it's a special cylinder. When you open the cylinder, the acetylene bubbles out of the acetone, and that's how you can safely transport it. And it means that Australia has no way of recycling these bottles because they have to be specially recycled. So what's been happening for the last couple of decades is all the gas companies, when these bottles get out of service, have just been stockpiling them because they can't throw them out. It's illegal to dump them. It's not economical to ship them overseas. The other day, they dug up tens of thousands of acetylene bottles that have been illegally dumped. There has been a new company recently that have set up to try and recycle these acetylene bottles. In the meantime, we're just still using acetylene bottles, and there's no mechanism to get rid of them. Okay, so in Australia, we kind of care about the environment, I guess. I mean, on a local level, right? People like to recycle. We've been recycling for ages. We've got dedicated bins for it. The government always runs these ads that's like, you've got to put stuff in the recycling bin. So we have, and it turns out that the government has just not been recycling because it's not economic enough or whatever. And in a great betrayal of public trust, they've just been sending the plastics overseas to be burnt, right? Because it's just too hard to recycle them. They couldn't be bothered. And when it started becoming public knowledge, people got a little bit annoyed at that because the government had been telling people to recycle. They thought it was a good thing. You know, people weren't really caring about how much plastic they were buying. Obviously, all the companies were putting heaps of packaging material in it because no one was feeling guilty about the plastic because they were putting it in a recycling bin and it was going to get recycled, but actually it was going over to... So in come a company called Red Cycle, and what they do is they say, well, the problem with the recycling thing is that it's just too complicated. So what we're going to do is just set up dedicated soft plastic bins. And then all the supermarkets thought this was a great idea. They got all involved, put all these dedicated soft plastic bins in there. And people really picked up on it because they wanted actual recycling. You're like, well, the recycling bin just gets dumped elsewhere. But if I separate all my soft plastics and put it in the soft plastic bin, they'll be doing something with it. And then it turned out, after they put bins in every single supermarket around here, Red Cycle weren't actually recycling it. They were just stockpiling it in a warehouse. And then the warehouse burnt down, and it became public knowledge that they weren't even trying to recycle it. They were just stockpiling it for no reason, and in response, the government just allowed plastics to be exported overseas to be burnt again. How did Mars have nuclear weapons thousands of years ago, and in the current year, Australia can't even recycle polyethylene? I am blind with rage at the Australian government.